Hi everyone, it's Rachel back with the Shades of Orange, and today I'm here to talk about science fiction and fantasy books. And I read some booktube darlings, and let's just say that I have some really unpopular opinions. But I also have some good recommendations for you all, so I hope you stick around. All that being said, let's get started. So starting with science fiction, which honestly takes up most of this video, I want to talk about A Memory Called Empire by Arkady Martine. This is one of those booktube darlings I was talking about, and this is set in a future world where there is a diplomat who is sent off to a far-flung planet. She is replacing the previous diplomat who died under mysterious circumstances, and so part of the story is a mystery trying to figure out what happened to him. And the perhaps most interesting part of the story is that there's some really unique technology involved, because the diplomat has the memories of the previous diplomat implanted into her brain through this device, and so she has these memories to help guide her. And the problem though is that the memories that she has been given are not the most recent, not leading up to his death, but are actually several years behind. And so she has this big memory gap where she's supposed to have this information available and she does not. And I think this is a story where the technology and the premise were really interesting, but the execution for me was lacking. And a lot of that came from the fact that I felt the pacing was off, and I just never really connected with the characters, and just something about this book just did not hook me in. And I can enjoy some more dry literary or cerebral science fiction, but in this case it just was missing that something. And so I decided not to continue on with the rest of the duology, and yeah, just thought this one was just okay, unfortunately. After that, I read An Unkindness of Ghosts by River Solomon, and this is a story set on a generational ship following a few characters, primarily a person named Aster, and they are going through different medical training, and we primarily follow them along with some other characters. And what's interesting about this story is that you get to find out that within the ship there is a very big class system, and there's also different cultures that are existing on different levels of the ship. And so it's really a story that is about class and privilege and personhood, and it's very tough. It definitely has some really grim subject matter in it. Grim in the way that I would compare this book to something like N.K. Jemisin. So if you're interested in those kind of books that deal with those really heavy social political commentaries, this one has that. However, unlike N.K. Jemisin, I didn't love this one quite as much as I hoped. And for me, again, you're going to see some themes here that I felt like the characters fell a bit flat. I appreciated a lot of what was done in this book. This book has amazing representation. So the author themselves, I believe, is non-binary, so they refer to themselves as them, they. And you have different characters within the book that also use those pronouns, and you find out that there's different cultures that refer to everyone in a certain gender or so forth based off of their own beliefs. And so it's a really big conversation. You get a lot of good diversity in that area, good conversations that personally I do not see enough. I really like that exposure because I don't have that enough in my personal circle of friends. And so I like that. Also, of course, its own voices, having an author and characters that are Black, and again, love so much about it. And on top of that, the main character Aster is, I believe, on the autism spectrum, and so you have a lot of references to the fact that they don't always understand phrases. They can't tell when someone is being hyperbolic or when they're actually saying something straight out, and also have trouble reading people's expressions and kind of have to put on extra effort in order to kind of present themselves in a way that is considered socially acceptable in the circles that they're running in. So many things going on in this book that I appreciate, but as for the story itself, I found it to be really flat, really forgettable. Same thing with the characters. I just did not find them to be interesting, and so without that hook, I just didn't have something to hold on to that made me want to keep turning the pages. So again, one that is very beloved on BookTube, very respected for its diversity, which again, I will acknowledge for that, but as for reading enjoyment, I did not love it. Next up, we have Vagabonds by Jingfang, which is translated by one of my favorite authors, Ken Liu. This is set in a future where humans have gone on to colonize Mars, and from there they decided to get independence and so broke away from Earth. There was a period of silence between the planets, and now they are reconnecting. The story follows a group of students that are coming back from a cultural exchange where they were staying on Earth and are now coming back to Mars. And basically this is a story about ideas, so it has very little plot and is very much a character story. And I really like the fact that it explores the difference between what would be traditionally seen as Western cultural ideas about independence and economic freedom and capitalism, all of that, versus more of an Eastern idealism of communism, working for the greater good and the common good and so forth. And so you have these two ideologies that are at the forefront of the story, and you get to see the students as they are grappling with the fact that Mars is supposed to be this utopia, but they've also come to appreciate things about these Western or Earth ideals, and I think the book just makes some really interesting commentary. I was at first very into it, but if I had a complaint with this book, it's the fact that it was way too long. And given the story, again, great ideas, but it did not need to be the length that it was. And if I wasn't listening to the audiobook version, because I did get a LAC or review copy from Libro FM, linked down below, but if I hadn't have gotten that, I probably would have DNF'd if I'd been reading a physical copy of it, because even with the audiobook, I read part of it and then I put down the audiobook and I didn't actually pick it up again until I was between audiobooks and just needed something to listen to, and that's not a good argument. So again, this book has great ideas, but you need to have a tolerance for an bloated story where it definitely should have been edited down. If it was like 200 pages, I would probably be singing its praises. I really like the ideas in this book. I like the characters, but it went on and on and on, and I got really tired of it before the story was over. Really quick, I want to mention two short stories that are part of the Amazon Forward collection. These are technically Audible and Amazon Kindle exclusive, so I kind of hate to mention them, but I did really enjoy them. So one is Randomize by Andy Weir, and this is a short story that involves randomization of numbers as well as quantum computing. And if you're a fan of Andy Weir's work and just love his techie science that he just dumps into his stories, you'll really enjoy this one. It doesn't seem to be the most popular in the collection, but I thought it was just fun. Not a perfect story, but you know, again, I just loved geeking out with him and hearing all of his nerdy facts about quantum computing. The other story I want to mention is Emergency Skin by N.K. Jemisin. And if you're a fan of her Broken Earth trilogy, I definitely recommend this one, even though it's not related, so you could pick it up first or whenever you want to. It involves a explorer being sent back to Earth to find out what happened to the planet that we savaged and then had to disregard and leave because we had basically destroyed it. And there's just some really good social commentary in this story. Her prose are amazing. I'll be honest, this book is definitely one I need to reread, or the story rather, because it's so complex in terms of the ideas that she introduces in just a few pages. And she definitely does not hold your hand when it comes to world building, and I love that. But again, it makes me want to reread this one because I know I didn't pick up every little detail, because she just hides it in her prose and just makes everything so subtle and so interesting. Love it, love it, love it. So if you're a fan of her work, definitely check out her short story. After that, I want to talk about a sci-fi graphic novel called Sentient by Jeff Lemire, and this is set on a ship where there is an attack, things go horribly wrong, all of the adults die, leaving the children in charge of the ship along with the help of their artificial intelligence that is the ship itself. And so basically the ship has to act as a mother, trying to teach the children how to run the ship, how to survive and get to their destination. And so yeah, I thought it was very likable. I mean, at times the children are annoying and frustrating because they're children, but I also thought it made the story very realistic. The artwork is good, and it is just one volume, so you'll fly through it. If I had a complaint, I actually say that the story could have been more fleshed out. I would have actually liked to see it expanded over maybe a trilogy of graphic novels, but enjoyable, easy to fly through. You can probably find it on Hoopla through your library. Finally, let's talk fantasy, and I read The Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss, and yes, this is a booktube darling, so you probably know the premise. So the short is that this is a coming-of-age story that is told over 3 days in a cavern, where you get to find out the backstory to this famous man known as the Kingkiller. And this is a story I went into with mixed expectations because I know it's so beloved on booktube, but I wasn't honestly sure if it would be my taste, and it wasn't exactly. So it is a coming of age story, which I sometimes appreciate, and some of my favorite parts of the story were the fact that it takes place, quite a bit of it at least, in a magic school, so you do get to learn about different kinds of magic, and those were definitely my favorite aspects. I love when you get to learn the rules of the magic system, how it works. There are some really classic tropey moments with professors. Some of them are just ridiculous, some of them are mean, and I definitely enjoyed those parts the most. I did find this book to be very predictable. If you read a lot of like classic fantasy, I think this one plays into a lot of the tropes, but I think for a lot of people, myself included at times, it can be very comforting to read a very familiar story. So because I've read other fantasy, whether it be published before or after, I've definitely read stories like this, and so I found myself comparing to other books and stories and so forth. So I like this one. The prose is very nice. The main character is kind of frustrating to read because he is just someone who is brilliant at everything, and I know there's an argument that he is an unreliable narrator. I'm not sure if we're supposed to believe that or not, but he's just brilliant, and sometimes I don't always love that. I prefer personally to read about an underdog, so that would be my preference. But yeah, overall I like this one. I was interested enough to continue on to the second book, and then I DNF'd the second book, so I don't have a full review of The Wise Man's Fear. I got about halfway through and I just didn't care. I felt like the characters were just meandering around. It just wasn't going anywhere, and honestly, if the third book ever comes out, I don't think I'll bother reading it. I'm definitely much more of a science fiction reader than a fantasy reader, and it definitely shows here. So that is it. We've made it to the end of the video. I would love to hear your comments and thoughts on all of my unpopular opinions. As well, tell me about a science fiction or fantasy book that everyone seems to love online that you do not. I would love to know if we share any unpopular opinions. If you're new to my channel, consider subscribing. I read a lot of science fiction, fantasy, as well as horror and thrillers. You can help me out by giving this video a thumbs up, sharing it around online, and hit that notification bell if you never want to miss a video. Thanks for watching. Talk to you again soon. Okay, bye-bye.